Welcome to the Unlock Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Lori Harris. And today we're going to talk about something that many highly trained, highly capable people rarely say out loud. You can have a really successful life, a really successful business life, a really successful career, and still feel strangely disconnected from it. You can be impactful, having a great impact on the world, being helpful, productive, respected, and super responsible, while at the same time feeling exhausted, emotionally thin, or strangely absent from your own life. And that's not really a symptom of failure, even though it might feel like it. Because the reality of it is that sometimes we can experience success in one area of our life and feel kind of subtly bankrupt in others. I've seen this happen over the years. People master real achievement, climbing the various ladders that they have constructed for themselves. Maybe they're in the area of vocation where they're really killing it, but their relationships have suffered, or the relationship suffers and their health is neglected, or maybe they're really good at taking care of themselves, pretty good with their family relationships, but their feeling of freedom is like almost out the window. They don't have the time to do the things they really want to do. And sometimes they don't even have the time to discover what's really still within them. And their own wants and desires can start to feel like all that comes second to the areas of our lives where we feel real responsibility. And then when that happens, life can feel really heavy and hard, and it's tempting to feel like, oh, I should just work harder, because we get into the habit of building and feeling like hard work is the natural and orderly response to performance. So if I work hard, then I can have. When I work hard, then I've earned the right to receive. And at some point, we feel out of congruence. We feel actually incongruent. And this is why I encourage myself and my clients to be reminded of the four quadrants that I've identified for life. There's health and well-being, there's love and relationships, vocation and creativity, and time and money freedom. Because we can be killing it in one area, but if it's only in one area, then you don't have a whole life, a whole enchilada life. So when you are a high performer, sometimes life can start to feel asymmetrical. One quadrant starts to dominate your entire identity, and achievement over and over again, climbing a ladder, can start to feel like it could compensate us for those places where we feel empty. Sometimes we're over functioning in one area and it can start to feel normal. So many leaders who are professionally overdeveloped can find themselves personally undernourished. So sometimes exhaustion is really a symptom of incongruence. You're not being lazy. You're not actually weak, but it's okay to admit that the life you're living is not matching your heart's desire. Oftentimes, exhaustion is the experience of living too far outside the field of yourself, when you have removed yourself from the circle of concern, where you are constantly performing or serving others, that you are no longer in touch with yourself and your own desires. I would love for us to remember that our desire is data. This is information that we need to acknowledge and receive, because when we do, it reveals for us the areas of our life where we might be neglecting. And when we suppress, it drains our own vitality. Vitality as in life. When you suppress, you are sucking away from what could be a beautiful, vibrant life. So when we know that we want more, that's not selfish. And we can be grateful and still hungry. You can want more without being a bad person. Wanting more is an indication of a life being born within us. So I want for us to understand that freedom isn't a destination. Being free, which I believe we all ultimately want to be free, and it starts from the moment of birth. We come into this world because we've outgrown another version of ourselves. And we come into the world, bursting into the world, being released from a cave, a cavern, a tunnel, into a big, wide open expanse of what's available to us. And it can feel like a cold, harsh world. And depending upon how you were attached and parented, it can be okay. You can learn that life can be still safe, depending upon how you were attached and attended to. But freedom for all of us, regardless of our family of origin and how we were cared for, freedom is not some destination to get to. It's our invitation to be that person now, to make the decisions that are congruent with being that person now. I'm reminded of our hero, Harriet Tubman, who I suspect would want us to know she was a regular person who decided early on about a life of freedom that she wanted. And she was consistent with being that person from a very early age. We focus on Harriet and her walk to freedom, her escape to freedom, her fight for freedom. But my suggestion is that Harriet lived her life as a free person, and it wasn't tied to her locale. It wasn't tied to whether or not she was being paid for her labor. It wasn't tied to whether or not someone else thought of her as property. Harriet Tubman saw herself as free, and she did the things that were consistent with being a free person, even as a child. We're reminded that Harriet was known and born under the name of Araminta Rose, and they called her Minty for short. And as a little one, a little person, she was routinely hired out by the person who sought to enslave her to work for other families. And while working for these other families, she worked for some woman named Miss Susan. And Miss Susan was a cruel employer. She frequently beat Harriet as a child and starved her and gave her very minimal nutrients. And driven by this horrible mistreatment, Harriet ran away. Or should I say, little Minty ran away. And she hid. She hid in a pigsty for 5 days, fighting the pigs for food. But ultimately, she knew that the freedom that she sought, the freedom that she was not going to be revealed inside this pigsty. So she removed herself from it and faced the consequences of having been missing for several days. And it forced her to return. So what she knew was that she was part of a family that loved her, a place that she wanted to return to, a place that she called home. And that's where she wanted to be. And the constant separation from her family for the purpose of work wore on her. And as early as age 6, being rented out to other people for work, to work as a nursemaid when she was a child herself, was hard on her. And she's like, you know what? I know I'm meant for more. And she took a stand for herself, even as a little one. Now, the time in the pigsty showed her that this demand that had been put on her and her efforts was harsh. She didn't deserve that. And she didn't deserve to be mistreated. She didn't deserve to be beaten. She didn't deserve to be in a position of being a child, caring for another child. She ran away and she hid. But eventually she came back, not because she wanted the treatment that she knew was awaiting her, but because of the extreme hardship that she was facing out in the cold. So she came back and came back to discover that data tells me that's not the way to go. I am to experience actual freedom, but this is not the way. And so she was punished and she went home to face the music. But she continued to be resilient. She continued to be rebellious. She continued to resist. And it was a foreshadowing of her being the independent, free person that she was meant to be. She did it again. She did the thing that indicated, oh, I don't see myself as under the thumb or under the ownership of another person. She found herself in a general store, and someone who called himself an overseer was in flight behind someone who was an enslaved person seeking his own freedom. And this person yelled out, "Stop him, stop him." And Harriet, rather than stopping the guy, actually was a block to this overseer, giving the enslaved person time and more time to run away. This is at age 12. And so this person who's in flight behind someone attempting to escape takes an iron metal weight and hurls it toward the escapee. And rather than hitting that person, it eventually hit Minty, whom we know as Harriet. That blow to her head cracked her skull and knocked her unconscious. And it had a lifelong impact on her life. She had a brain injury, a traumatic brain injury that left her experiencing feelings of epilepsy and narcolepsy. And because she literally had a fractured skull, she lived with this forever. Many people would have thought falling asleep uncontrollably would be yet another reason not to attempt to go towards her freedom. But she believed that she herself to be a free person. And what she wanted to do is to match her outside circumstances to her internal feeling of herself. And so she went ahead and went out into a search for freedom. And even though she did suffer these bouts of narcolepsy, she regarded them as happening for her, not to her. She regarded them as times when Spirit, God, spoke to her and told her what her next move would be. So it's a great lesson in that. Life isn't happening to us, it's happening for us. And we have to go in and mind the circumstances of our life to see what is there for us to learn and how we can benefit from our experiences. So, as a young person, what do we know? Minty, also known as Harriet, also known as Araminta, she is a free person and she acts from that place. She does the things that free people do. She thinks of herself as free. She does the things that indicate that she is free. Freedom for her was not a destination. It was a way of being. Her very beingness was free. So ask yourself this question this week. In what area of your life are you carrying an identity that is the truth of your nature, but somehow you've walked away from it? It feels as though you've abandoned yourself. When you have these conversations with yourself, you learn more about yourself. This is how you discover who you are meant to be, being the person now, living from a place of freedom now, not as a destination, but as a way of being. So when we allow ourselves to know what it is that we really want, and then rather than one day, someday, thinking of it as a destination, a distant place, we instead do the things that we want to do, it brings about a feeling of wholeness and freedom in the moment. So thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Unlock Your Life podcast with Lori Harris. Which area of your life could you experience more freedom if you allowed yourself to know and tell the truth to yourself and then live from that place? Where are you not in congruence? And where can you bring a little more truth, a little more honesty to the internal conversation you're having with yourself? I'm Coach Lori, and it's my great privilege to speak with you each week. It's your time to shine, and you're ready for the next step. All rise. See you next week.